Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Current Status, and I'm one of your co-hosts, Pumla Schmidt. You can find me on Twitter as Exchange Goddess, and I'm joined by my other co-hosts. Teresa, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Teresa Miller, and you can find me on Twitter at 24/7 IT Connect.
And today we have a special guest, Rick Dehlinger, but I'm going to call him Rick Dees. So, Rick, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? And are we going to be talking about the top 40 today?
We can only talk about the top 40 if you promise to pay me, like the guy who does the top 40. I'm certain gets paid, because I definitely don't get paid like that guy. That would be a heck of a bonus. Oh, so I get to introduce myself, huh? Well, my name's Rick Dehlinger. You can find me on Twitter at Rick D4Real. Yeah, shoot. I don't know what to say about myself. It's a lot of time, many moons spent in the desktop virtualization space. A little time at Citrix, a little time at Microsoft. A lot of consulting along the way. 5 years or so living in the cloud-hosted services space, and last 6 months I've spent at Atlantis Computing, working with and building a bunch of really wicked smart people around me. How about that? That work?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's better than, what I do sometimes, like today.
Hi, my name is Rick. What do you want to talk about? I could do that too, but no, that would be no fun whatsoever.
So you mentioned that the last 6 months you've been working for a storage company, and what specifically do you guys focus on? Is it like this thing called hyper-convergent storage?
Yeah, so I work for, the company I work for is Atlantis Computing. And Atlantis' core technology and product set is all around software-defined storage. We built our name and our history in the company up until the last couple of years or so, working to do a bang-up job of solving the hardest workload pain in any data center, aka hosted desktops or VDI. In the recent year or so, we've released a product called USX, which is a real high-function software-defined storage layer that you can drop into existing environments, put on top of new environments. It runs on top of hypervisor as a virtual storage appliance, and then gives you all sorts of crazy cool capabilities of acceleration, caching, compression, massive deduplication, and then here recently, back beginning of May, we actually released a product called Hyperscale, which is a combination of our USX, our real powerful software-defined storage technology, on a variety of different hardware, 4 different flavors of specifications of hardware. That's all-flash, hyper-converged appliance, basically.
So, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate, or I guess that's what you call it.
You got your horns out?
Yeah. Actually, I can probably have horns.
Yeah. I was going to say, we could just add our horns.
Yeah.
You can do it right in the Hangout.
I know.
You can add little cool...
This whole hyperconvergence thing, I have sort of a storage background. I don't think I'm sold yet on it. Yeah, and maybe because I'm still in that old school, legacy storage thought process of almost that siloed effect where you have your storage and then you have your servers, and the idea that single pane of glass is nice, but at the same time, the way some of these hyper-converged systems work is that you got to buy these nodes in order to scale out or scale properly. I mean, I'm not going to name any vendors or anything, but take for instance Exchange. It's a pretty beefy application, and in order to get specific IOPS requirements I would need, I may need up to 10, 15 nodes. And in today's world, we're all talking about reducing hardware footprint in the data center. So adding 20 nodes to support, an Exchange infrastructure, that's not going to fly. If I have to go to, my management and say, oh yeah, I want to use this hyper-converged system to run Exchange, but I need 20 nodes. They're just going to laugh in my face and go, okay.
So
the goal is to reduce footprint.
Yeah. So the one interesting part that you pointed out there is the kind of the baseline assumption of the count you need to get some really dramatic throughput performance out of a hyperconverged appliance. And that's, the hyperconvergence and the people that are functioning in this space, selling product in this space, I don't think any of them would argue that it's the absolute cat's meow. Everybody should use it for absolutely everything, every workload, every type of company. It definitely has its spots where it fits and where it doesn't fit. The promise is fantastic. The promise of simplicity and the integration, quick setup. From my perspective, if you look at a lot of the cloud services that are available today, they're putting a lot of pressure on the cost models and the management models in enterprise as well. And that's even more pronounced as you get into the mid-market. A lot more emphasis on finding business value versus investing in buying more and more stuff. So kind of a wandering answer to a little bit of a wandering question, but
it's tough. I mean, right now I'm going through an upgrade for a pretty big application. I won't name what it is, and we're deciding on the storage backend, and we did consider hyperconvergence. We haven't completely decided on what we're going to do yet, but it just makes, I don't know, I'm still on the fence about it. I like the single pane of glass, but at the same time, I'm just not sure if, an enterprise of the size I work in, if we're ready for that. I mean, there's a lot of, what's the word?
Polish, integration.
No, I can't think of it. I'll think of it.
So one thing that's probably a challenging aspect for a company like I'd imagine you work for, and it would have, we should probably have spent a little bit more time up front introducing ourselves. But one thing I'd imagine that's a challenge is the operationalization aspect of the infrastructure. So I'm guessing that in your environment you've got some pretty siloed roles and responsibilities and process flows and stuff. So that's one place where a hyperconvergence, I think, does cause a challenge, especially for larger, slower moving types of organizations. Hyperconvergence is really the combination of a variety of different resources, right? Your compute, your network, and your storage all together. And as soon as you start to bring all those together, you've got some pretty substantial overlap between the roles and responsibilities of the two, right?
Yeah, it gets really gray, and then you're like, well, who's responsible for what? So then the case goes...
Especially since it's everything. It's the server and the storage,
Yep.
and there's networking built in. Yeah.
That makes it better than, buying a dedicated appliance such as Tintry, which is just focused on virtualization, or like a nimble storage, something like that, where you are just storage, but it's a simplified platform versus using another. I'm not going to name any more vendors because I'll probably get in trouble. But some of the other acronyms out there, which are a little bit, I would say, more difficult to manage versus some of the newer storage vendors. I mean, to me, I guess if we're going to break down those silos, then we want to go with hyperconvergence, but maybe the silos don't want to be broken down, because then that's a completely shift in the way the whole IT organization works in, because then it's a business decision. You change your whole infrastructure.
And some organizations, that change, that business decision, oh, see, now I'm jealous. I wasn't prepped. I don't have a glass of scotch here next to me.
We can pause the show. We can take a commercial break.
Beer break.
Sponsored
That's
by.
awesome.
Yeah, no kidding. But in some businesses are really trying hard to modernize their IT infrastructure, their operations, the way they run their infrastructure. And the typical technologist, I think, is probably relatively resistant to change. They don't want that little world. They got their process. They got things working. It's happy. They're from their perspective, they're keeping the business happy. The lights are on,
No
and they're
change.
protected. Yeah, no change. So, I think that's definitely one of the things that's slowing down the adoption of, I'd call it an architectural construct that is hyperconvergence. Hyperconvergence crosses all of those, right?
I'm going to commend you. You're actually the first person that I've talked to that actually says hyperconvergence may not fit for everybody. So kudos to you for saying that, because everybody I've talked to is like, oh yeah, it's great. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It'll do everything for you, even do your laundry for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really? And I've never heard that before either. Like you see a lot of it in the VDI space because there's a true use case for it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I've never talked to a vendor that has tried to sell it to me for Exchange or my whole environment. So
yeah,
I think it's interesting that you've had that experience.
Yeah. I'm not naming name vendors though.
No, that's okay.
We're gonna keep it out. But
so it does laundry and makes breakfast.
Makes breakfast. I think it watches my kids too.
I'm guessing that's
sure there's a unicorn herd in there somewhere too.
That's probably the only trick they've got in their proverbial bag, though, right? The only tool they've got. So if that's the only tool you got, then you got a hammer. Everything looks like a nail, right?
Yeah, and I'm gonna agree with you. I just don't think hyperconvergence fits in every scenario. I think.
I'd agree.
I think there's certain scenarios that would fit in. I mean, storage is like buying a car. Are you going to drive a Porsche around and put a car seat in the back? Probably not. That's going to work for your midlife crisis, or fancy night out to dinner. But you're not going to put 2 car seats in the back of a Porsche.
Yeah, you lose the cool factor a little bit there, don't you?
Yeah, or you're not going to go in a minivan dressed in a ball gown and a tuxedo, would you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So. It's like buying a car. I mean, storage. That there's different. I think with each requirement or each situation, I think it's different and calls for different types of storage. Yeah.
And for if the environment that you're talking about, the application that you're talking about, if it's of the scale where you're talking about needing 20 clusters worth of hyperconverged infrastructure. I mean, granted, my perspective of what the capabilities of hyperconverged infrastructure can provide is a little bit skewed, because the stuff that Atlantis has brought to market is all flash-based. So from the performance level, I mean, the performance is astonishing. But I'm guessing that there's probably virtualization. Does this app that you're talking about run on top of a hypervisor, or is it still?
Oh yeah, it's a completely virtualized application that runs on a particular type of hypervisor that's pretty popular.
Is it their own hypervisor?
No.
All right. This is like 20 questions.
Yeah.
Is it bigger than a bread box?
Yeah.
Is it?
Without vendors.
If we compare it to
I don't want to get in trouble by anybody.
All right. So, so let's redirect the question a little bit then. So you said it's not one size fits all. Where do you see the benefit for organizations, and what applications are they going to use it for?
So I think it benefits the organizations that don't necessarily see themselves in the business of IT, although that's, as those words come out of my mouth, a lot of the people that are actually interested in hyperconvergence are like service providers. It's a very popular construct for service providers where they've got to have high levels of consistency and automation and so forth. But in terms of the types of workloads, maybe start first in the kind of the market space that, from my experiences, are really adopting hyperconvergence. I would say it's the service provider space is definitely relatively high on that list. One of the reasons I would say is because the cost relative to the capabilities you get out of the platform. You know, you can totally break substantial new ground in that regard. The other one I would say is probably more the mid-market. You know, the enterprise space where you've got brownfield environments, you got, you know, a lot of complexity around organizational structure, internal billing, ownership of applications, politics, history, you know, mishmash of all sorts of different kinds of requirements and other systems. You know, the enterprise space is, I think, is going to end up being one of the latent adopters, except for specific use cases. One of those that's a brain dead use case because it's kind of it's a workload that you can kind of stamp, set for a specific size, and then scale out pretty much horizontally would be virtual desktops. That's where a good portion of the adoption is already happening. But the mid-market space, mid-market is actually where most of the interest in Atlantis's hyperconverged product offering, hyperscale, is really most of the interest is coming out of there.
But has VDI really exploded? I mean, is the adoption really there with VDI? Because I know
it depends on who you ask.
Yeah, like every so often, like, oh, it's the greatest thing. Everyone's going to be, you know, VDI. That's it. You know,
the year of VDI. Oh wait, no, it's not.
No, maybe next year.
No, so yeah. I mean, so let's face it, and we can get this straight out on the table. You know, VDI is absolutely not the right tool for every need, every application delivery need in every organization and every use case, right? I'd look at it as kind of a fencing tool, right? You got a fencing tool, it's the right tool for doing the job, and you need a whole bucket load of other tools to do the job. But you could do a fantastic job with this one tool that's specially designed for it. So VDI hasn't gone ballistic by anybody's stretch, by market penetration, adoption, usage rates.
It's tough.
But, well, VDI is historically complex, right?
Especially
it's not one size fits all.
Yeah, you know, just from my experience, it's really hard to deploy. You know, in larger organizations with thousands of users that have different use cases, that's even more difficult. Now, you know, if you have an organization with 7,000 employees that do one specific function, oh yeah, I mean, just run all those desktops. But if you've got, you know, let's say 100 different, you know, types of positions, actually up to 200 types of positions, that makes it really difficult to roll out, you know, a consistent laptop for everybody, or I'm sorry, desktop.
Yeah, one of the organizations that I previously worked in, we found it to be a really nice use case for, it was healthcare. So
yeah, healthcare as well.
Yeah, so you had your main EHR, you had your OWA. We didn't even have Outlook installed, you know, and it was, it worked really well for certain people. It wasn't the whole organization, but it was a use case of about 2,000 people, and that's a big deal.
Oh yeah, something like that. It's great. I think healthcare. I mean, I'm in healthcare now, and I wasn't previously as well. And it just seemed like healthcare was, you know, I think is a big user of VDI, just because that they have a larger base of users that do a specific function.
I'm sorry, I'm doing 20 questions again in the back of my head. I keep getting these little tips. Okay, I will name this application by the end of this episode. I'll name it privately though. Okay.
Yes, our off air after the after show.
The after show. Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough. Yeah, so I mean, kind of going back to your question, what kind of use cases are people looking at, and where they're adopting hyper-converged infrastructure? Definitely, hosted desktops, the term that I use. Hosted desktops could be server OS delivered, right? Hosted personal or hosted shared. That's a great use case. People have been trying, look at like VCE, for example, FlexPod. People have been trying to come up with these stampable modular architectures that they can put in, qualify for X number of users, and then just stamp them out, add additional quantities as they come by. So, hyperconvergence is fantastic for that, right? You're taking a lot of that storage I/O that's historically on the network or on your storage fabric. You're keeping all that stuff local. It's all modular and consistent. It's a great use case. We're seeing some uptake across other types of use cases. General purpose storage for a virtual infrastructure, for example. We got people running everything from web servers and database servers to vCenter and all your infrastructure services. We got people that are running that kind of stuff on it. So I can look at it through a couple of different lenses, right? The easiest, most current one for me to look through is through the Atlantis lens, right? Because we've got a horse in that race, so to speak, now. But stepping outside of the Atlantis lens and going back to my previous world, which was cloud-based services, right? Hosted desktops were a primary delivery vehicle for the company I used to work at. I would have given my freaking arm and my leg and my third unborn child to have gotten hyper-converged infrastructure in. I swear, I would have.
Really?
I absolutely would have, yeah. And I was sitting on a bunch of, let's say some popular infrastructure, some of the more traditional types. But the thing that ended up killing it, as weird as it sounds, was the operationalization, the operational aspects. I couldn't overcome in the time window that I was focused on those efforts. I wasn't able to overcome the resistance of the operations team to bring in something new in. Right. Even though the stuff that was there was not doing its freaking job. If the storage can't hold up, it can't provide enough performance to provide a consistent user experience, then you should be finding something else, right? Not buying some more of the same crap that's performing miserably.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, too, because a lot of the organizations that offer the converged infrastructure will offer a POC. So you're not even, they'll take that right out if you choose not to keep it. So it's unfortunate they didn't budge on that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Such is life.
Yeah.
But actually, so of course, Nutanix was one of the first players in this space, right? And I was working really hard to get those guys in as one of the earlier players, and it just never materialized. Never materialized.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Lisa.
So do you feel that hyperconverged or converged infrastructure is here to stay? That it will keep growing and become part of our IT lives for the long haul?
I think so. Yeah, I think it'll be a part of it. It's weird if you look back if you look back at some of the stuff that, oh God, and I don't know if I want to dare say this and date myself, but I remember the days when we're setting frickin' switches on cards in computers so your COM ports didn't conflict on the IRQs, you know?
Oh yeah.
But I mean, if you think
I'm
about
there
it,
with
the stuff that we had to touch and tweak to keep a service running over time has gotten more and more macro, right? So, you know, in those days, every computer we touched, we had to go and we had to tear them apart and we had to tweak those frickin' dip switches.
Yeah.
You know, you look at it today, hyperconverged is really just taking bits and pieces, other bits and pieces that historically had been managed separately, pulling those things together into a single unit that you buy and you manage over time. So I think hyperconverged pods and hyperconvergence as an architecture, I think, will be around for a long time. But I think ultimately we're going to end up seeing it superseded by additional layers above it. So it just ends up becoming one of the other building blocks that we drop in. You know, the more things are cloudified, the pressure and the technologies that public cloud are bringing to traditional IT infrastructure. You know, they're bringing us some great innovations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cloudified.
And putting a lot of pressure.
Is that a new word?
That. Yeah.
Cloudified?
Cloudified.
It's a word in the Rictionary.
In the Rictionary.
Yeah, it is. I'm famous for making up my own language.
Oh,
that's awesome.
So I'm curious, in both the worlds that you guys live in right now, are there any pockets of the organization? I mean, is the topic of hyperconvergence, is it even being considered?
Yes.
I mean, Pumala, you had kind of mentioned that you kicked it around a little bit in consideration for that one big Mac Daddy Pig application.
I think there's still possibility. I think just enterprise IT is changing in general. You know, there's so much stuff going on, especially with, you know, this whole cloudifying thing. You know, we have to think differently. So, yeah, I think, as you said earlier, it's a slow adoption. I think eventually we'll probably warm up to it a little bit more. Slowly.
Yeah.
Slowly.
Yeah, slowly. I think there's a lot of change. There's silos that you have to break down, and you know you have to convince a lot of key stakeholders too. And you know what value is it bring to the business.
Yeah, and you kind of feeding off of the point that you made about being in the healthcare world. You've also got the compliance stuff that you got to deal with, right?
Oh, yeah.
You look at other industries like banking and finance, which is actually probably Atlantis's biggest, strongest vertical. You know, you look at all of the, you know, the regulatory compliance those guys have to deal with. It's insane, and that slows down the evolution of technology, right?
Oh,
it does.
Yes, security is a big one. You know, you mentioned the word anthem, and people just freak out now. You're like, oh my God, you know. Yeah, people just stop dead in their tracks and putting money. Here, do whatever, just make it go away. You know, make it safe.
But
that's a scary scenario.
Yeah, it was. I also think, though, from an adoption perspective of the converged products, it is newer, so a lot of organizations are going to wait till it's time to, you know, refresh their storage, and they're also going to wait for the product to evolve and grow a little bit more. That's kind of what I'm seeing.
And that's totally fair.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the hyperconverged infrastructure technologies that we've got on the market today, you know, by most enterprise measures, you know, they wouldn't be considered enterprise ready. You know, they're missing some of the softer spots that you know, the enterprise requires. So there's definitely a lot of evolution, and I think there's a lot of opportunities there as well for innovation.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool, actually. You know, as a guy who's really fond of trying to enable change, trying to enable the evolution of technology. You know, I get really frustrated dealing with and trying to work with, you know, in my past world, and even today's world as a consultant, you know, and dealing with enterprise. It's just, you know, maybe it's my ADD or whatever, but the pace,
It's tough.
you know, pretty soon a bunny runs by and, you know, I'm off to something else. But, you know, I'm definitely a big proponent of trying to eliminate some of the barriers that are slowing the pace of innovation. Encourage innovation. Innovation ultimately ends up working out in all of our favors.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what do you think about a product like this in terms of like a disaster recovery site? Like, it's very turnkey, right? Converged infrastructure. So it seems like it would really simplify an offsite of some kind. Is that a realistic use case that you guys are, you know, having customers look at?
It is, actually. In fact, one of the so I was sitting at Atlantis' our customer event, Atlantis Connect, back in I think it was February-ish time frame, and was sitting down next to a customer that had just spent you know, seven figures plus on Atlantis technology, and they found out about. We essentially started talking to the world for the first time about our hyperscale product at that event, and I had some really interesting conversations with this customer. They're in the financial services space, but they were actually, I mean, they were extremely interested. Their interest was piqued because they've got this one major project they're working on right now. Desktop virtualization is a big chunk of it, and we're obviously playing a part in that, and the general purpose storage around their virtual desktops. But the next project on their horizon that they're slowly working, kind of a longer term project, is they're building their DR data center. And yeah, the simplicity of it, the modularity of it, and admittedly also for them the cost model was extremely interesting. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that space evolves, how that particular customer, now that I've had that touch point with them, how their usage ends up evolving.
Yeah. And what about integration with cloud-based services? Is that there yet?
Depends on the technology provider that you're talking about and how you define integration with cloud-based services.
So, like,
it starts to get pretty muddy.
Okay. Was there support for like AWS or like your Amazons or anything like that? I just can't recall.
I know that there's multiple. I know that multiple vendors are working on talking about and starting to pitch different levels of integration. AWS is probably the main one that I've heard. I know of at least one provider that's also working on some Azure integration, but there's so many different layers and ways that you can aggregate or to integrate, I should say.
Right.
And depending on the angle that you're coming from. With hyperconverged infrastructure, it's really either a premise play for a cloud provider or for your own organization. Because when you're consuming another provider's infrastructure, you don't really have a say in what infrastructure is underneath the service you're consuming, especially the main public ones, right? With AWS or with Azure. You got these predefined sizes and buckets and performance levels and things like that you buy into. So when you start looking at how do you integrate hyperconverged into public cloud services like that, then you talk about there's actually some really interesting things that could be done with data layer integration, off-site backup, cross-cloud VM migration, there's definitely some really cool opportunities there, and I think we're going to see some of the different vendors in the marketplace, Atlantis included, start to do some really cool things there. But there's also, especially if you're talking about the enterprise space, there's still quite a bit of resistance to adoption of cloud technologies too, right?
Right.
Oh yeah, definitely. Cloud enterprise, that's just kind of, scary, especially in healthcare.
Yeah, in some regards. So are you guys, Boomala, in your current role, are you guys looking at or utilizing any cloud services?
Yes and no.
So you probably use a web conferencing service. You guys use a WebEx or a GoToMeeting or?
No, we use Skype for Business. Link. Skype for Business, formerly known as Link.
Which is a cloud service, right? Are you doing the on-premise? You hosting your own Link servers?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're still. I'm in healthcare, so the whole cloud thing is still a little scary, especially this past year with Anthem and the several breaches with the Blue Cross providers. So we're a little hesitant to go there.
We big gun shy.
Yeah, it's kind of like I think eventually.
Especially when you're. I assume that you're especially gun shy when you're talking about dealing with patient data.
Yes, not only patient data, but personal data, and most of that was what was stolen from the Anthem breach. That was data that went back 10 years, and it's just names and social security numbers. So it's scary, and especially when you're in an organization, like the Blue Cross, where there are several companies that are across the country, and they're all independently owned, but they're affiliated with each other. And being affiliated, sometimes you do business with each other, and your customer information, transcends the different organizations. So with Anthem, even though they're a separate company, we were still affected by that. Several other Blue Cross organizations were also affected, even though it was Anthem that got breached, but customers of other Blue Cross providers got affected. So it's very scary when you think about it, because it's millions and billions of dollars potentially lost, and it's just over this little thing called security.
Little thing called security.
Just little thing,
Oh man.
Yeah.
I tell you, I started to dig really deep into security with some of the development work we were doing with the platform of the cloud provider I used to work for. And man, I tell you, the deeper I got down into it, and the more I started to learn about the tools and the techniques and stuff that the black hats have at their fingertips.
Yeah.
It's like, no. I want to go back to being ignorant.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier, a lot more settled to be ignorant,
It is. I mean, the stuff that they use, their tools, and can you imagine what the NSA does? Like, I don't even want to know.
Right.
They're like, several years ahead of us with the tools that they utilize. So I don't want to know. Just pretend. Ignorance is bliss sometimes when it comes to that.
It is. Ignorance is total bliss. Unfortunately, somebody inside of organizations that are maintaining data like this it's their job to care, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell you.
So we're almost out of. Wow, we're almost.
Yeah, we're
actually out of time, guys.
Yeah, this was really interesting.
Yeah, definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rick, for being on the show with us. Yeah. Next time.
Happy to.
Next
Sorry
time.
it took so long to make it happen.
Yeah.
You literally, the last time we were slated to talk, I ended up being in London.
Oh.
And so I would have been up at 3 a.m. or something like that to do the session.
Well, you chose London over us. Seriously, we're not.
I chose.
It would have been like getting up with a child. Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't we didn't need to wake you up that early.
No, but it's great that we finally, got you on the show, and hopefully you'll get to come back. And we can
Well,
chat.
yeah, hopefully I didn't burn too many bridges. You know,
No.
I didn't make fun of you guys or anything like that.
No.
So
No. Yeah, I'm
We're
sure.
all good.
Yeah,
your
I mean,
listeners won't throw a boycott out there. No, never bring that Joker back.
No, I probably said worse things
Okay.
on air. But yeah, it's wow. It is almost July. We're on to what, 24 episodes now, Teresa?
Yeah, 24.
24.
It's been fun.
It has been
Yeah.
a fun ride. So I guess next week is July. We're actually off next week.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll be back. Actually, we may be off the following week because it's the U.S. Women's Open, and
Okay.
yeah, I might be watching the golf tournament. Sorry, that comes first. It's only 30 minutes from my house, so I'm definitely gonna be going to watch Women's Open.
There's a
balance
lot
life,
of
right?
Thursdays in July. Yeah, there's a lot of Thursdays in July too, so we probably still hammer out a few episodes.
I'm not gonna be golfing. I'm just gonna watch everybody else golf.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You don't
my
want
golf
me
skills would not be. Yeah, mine either.
Yeah.
Spooky.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a great evening.
Yep.
And see you guys later. And we're off the air.
All right. Cheers.